What transforms a warrior king into an emperor who bends entire civilizations to his will? For Charlemagne, known as Carolus Magnus in Latin, it was not merely conquest, but an unrelenting vision of unity through power. Born in 742 and crowned King of the Franks in 768, Charlemagne inherited more than a throne. He inherited a fragmented realm, one threatened from within by tribal divisions and from without by pagan resistance. But, unlike his predecessors, he wielded not just the sword, but also a doctrine to Christianize and centralize through calculated force. By 774, Charlemagne had conquered the Lombards in northern Italy, assuming the title King of the Lombards. This was no ceremonial honor. It marked the beginning of a calculated expansion, with the church as both partner and justification. Charlemagne understood that religious legitimacy was the key to enduring authority. His campaigns across Europe were therefore not only military actions, but also spiritual offensives. He compelled the defeated to accept baptism, erected churches in newly conquered lands, and punished resistance with iron resolve. The defining shift came on Christmas Day, 800 AD. In the grandeur of St. Peter's Basilica, Pope Leo III crowned him Imperator Romanorum, Emperor of the Romans. It was a deliberate revival of the Western Roman imperial title, absent since 476 AD. Charlemagne's coronation symbolized divine sanction, signaling that kingship alone could no longer contain his rule. Now he stood as the protector of Christendom, wielding both secular and sacred power. Yet behind this majestic rise lay a brutal truth. Charlemagne's reign, though draped in glory, was forged through campaigns that crushed non-Christian tribes, subjugated noble families, and obliterated dissent. The crown he wore in Rome was not merely gold, it was lined with the blood of thousands who resisted his new order. And none felt the weight of that iron fist more than the Saxons. The Verdun massacre, 4,500 executed in a day. It happened in the autumn of 782 near the banks of the river Aller, in a place known as Verdun. Here, under Charlemagne's direct authority, 4,500 Saxon prisoners, rebels, warriors, and possibly civilians were executed in a single day. Not killed in battle, not slain in ambush, but systematically beheaded on royal command. This was not the fury of a chaotic battlefield. This was organized mass execution, ordered in cold resolve. The background, Saxon resistance to Frankish expansion, had erupted once again. Despite years of forced baptisms and punitive raids, many Saxon tribes remained fiercely loyal to their traditional gods and way of life. In 782, a large Saxon force ambushed and annihilated a Frankish contingent at the Battle of Suntal, killing several of Charlemagne's high-ranking envoys. Charlemagne's response was swift, decisive, and merciless. Primary sources, particularly the royal Frankish annals, Annalis Regni Francorum, record the event with chilling clarity. In this year, the Lord King Charles came to the place called Verdun and ordered that 4,500 Saxons who had broken the Christian oath and killed his envoys be put to death. There is no mention of trial, negotiation, or mercy. This was vengeance, sanctioned as justice. The victims were likely warriors who had surrendered or been captured under the presumption of clemency. Some modern scholars suggest the number may include not only fighters, but also community leaders, elders, and even boys deemed old enough to bear arms. Though no contemporary source explicitly mentions women among the dead, Saxon society was not immune to the brutal reach of retribution. In a culture where familial loyalty and tribal identity were paramount, it is conceivable, though not definitively recorded, that women connected to the rebels may have also faced punishment, exile, or death in the wake of the slaughter. What happened at Verdun was not forgotten. It sent a clear message across the pagan frontiers. Resistance would not be tolerated, and the price for defying the Frankish emperor was extermination. It was the turning point in the Saxon Wars, a moment when Christianization through conquest transformed into systemic annihilation. The river ran quietly after the executions, but the silence was deceptive. Beneath it flowed the memory of 4,500 lives extinguished in a single royal decree, each one a symbol of a people fighting not just for faith, but for their very survival. Forced conversion or death, the terrifying choice for Saxon families. To a Saxon tribesman in the late 8th century, Charlemagne's offer was brutally simple: convert to Christianity or die. This was not metaphorical rhetoric, it was royal policy, written into law, enforced by sword, and carried out with unwavering consistency across the rebellious Saxon territories. After the Verdun massacre of 782, Charlemagne escalated his campaign of forced Christianization. Pagan shrines were burned. Sacred groves, central to Saxon religious life, were cut down or desecrated. Priests and monks followed Frankish armies into the field, baptizing entire villages under the looming threat of military force. But for those who refused the rite of baptism, the consequences were absolute. The Capitulatio de Partibus Saxoniae, a legal code issued by Charlemagne in the early 780s, explicitly codified this terror. In its clauses, the emperor declared, "If any one of the race of the Saxons shall have wished to hide himself unbaptized, and shall have scorned to come to baptism, let him be punished by death." Under these laws, pagan rituals, sacrifices, or even public expression of old beliefs were punishable by execution. This was not just about individuals. Families were torn apart, entire villages were uprooted. Children were baptized without parental consent. In some cases, husbands converted under duress while wives clung to ancestral beliefs, only to be separated, punished, or worse. Refusal to convert was treated as treason, not just against the emperor, but against the divine order of Christian kingship. Even the act of accepting baptism offered no lasting protection. Many Saxons who converted under pressure later returned to their old ways during temporary rebellions, only to be slaughtered or enslaved when the Franks reasserted control. For many, faith became a mask of survival, a fragile performance beneath the watchful eyes of imperial authority. Marriage as control, Saxon nobility's daughters reassigned. When swords could no longer subdue, Charlemagne turned to marriage. But in his imperial court, matrimony was not a sacred union, it was a mechanism of control. After military conquests and mass baptisms, the emperor implemented another layer of dominance: the strategic redistribution of Saxon noblewomen. These women, once poised to inherit status within their own societies, were reassigned into marriages with loyal Frankish nobles or warriors. It was a deliberate policy, designed not only to sever the lineage of Saxon resistance, but to fuse the conquered bloodlines into the fabric of the Carolingian realm. Their identities were erased through baptism, their marriages arranged without consent, and their futures reshaped in service of an empire that had destroyed their homes. The historical record does not name many of these women, but traces of their fate appear in royal charters and monastic accounts. References to noble Saxon brides being given as rewards or guarantees of loyalty can be found. These unions were not romantic nor cultural reconciliations, they were acts of appropriation. By binding Saxon women to Frankish men, Charlemagne sought to extinguish the possibility of Saxon resurgence through bloodline or alliance. In effect, noble daughters became human spoils of war. For Charlemagne, this practice served multiple aims. It rewarded loyalty among his warriors, neutralized the political power of Saxon clans, and further embedded Christian norms into every corner of the realm. But for the women themselves, it was a life forged under occupation, lived in foreign courts under foreign names, in a foreign faith. Exiled to the west, Charlemagne's mass deportation of the Saxons. Conquest did not end with the battlefield or the church font. For thousands of Saxons, survival meant exile. Entire Saxon populations were forcibly deported from their ancestral homelands and resettled deep within Frankish territory, dispersed, disarmed, and deliberately fragmented. Charlemagne had not only subdued a people, he had erased their landscapes, scattered their families, and buried their past beneath the soil of another land.